For the unaware, there is a theory in the Elder Scrolls that the Nerevarine decided to go on an expedition to Akavir following the events of the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. For as long as I've known about this theory, I've always hated it, because in my mind it goes against everything that we know about that character's purpose, and I don't think it logically holds up whatsoever. And to be clear, this is my opinion, and it's okay if you think differently from me on this. But I'm not just going to be complaining about this, I'm going to be providing an alternative answer that still uses this Akavir claim as a base. So please allow me to explain my fanfic theory on where the Nerevarine wound up. For starters, where does this theory come from? Well, the only evidence for this theory is from a piece of radiant dialogue from NPC chatter in Oblivion.
Rumor has it the Nerevarine has left Morrowind on an expedition to Akavir and has not been heard from since.
And to me, this is just a completely unreliable source of information to be taken as fact. There could be grains of truth in there, but I wouldn't expect some random Oblivion dialogue from an NPC to be 100% accurate. If it were from a specific character's mouth, that might mean something more, like if we heard this news from Joffrey or Martin Septim, but the fact that this is a line that can be said by just about any random NPC proves that it's more a rumor than anything else. And this rumor does not reappear in Skyrim, and we hear no other evidence to corroborate this claim in any in- or out-of-game sources thereafter. Now, what we do get is a piece of lore added by the PGE3, which says that whether the mysterious figure who arrived in Morrowind was truly Nerevar reborn cannot be known, but the repercussions of that arrival on the shores of Vardenfell may not yet be fully realized. Dagothr and 2 members of the Tribunal, Almalexia and Sothasil, were destroyed in the Nerevarines' fury. Vivek too may have been killed, but his fate is currently undetermined. The Nerevarine likewise has vanished. So I think that the Nerevarine is gone, but has not gone to Akavir. And why not? Well, aside from the fact that the claim about Akavir is unsupported and tenuous at best, I don't think that it fits in character with what we know about the Nerevarine. Now, figuring out the goals of a player character is difficult, of course, but what we do know about the Nerevarine across all playthroughs was that they were given a task at the end of the events of the game by Azura herself. If Vivek is still alive by the time you've beaten Tribunal, she will say this line.
Your work in Morrowind is not finished, Nerevarine. Vivek still lives, but I believe his time grows short. Protect my people. Defend these lands. The skies of Mournhold are clear once again. Let these people suffer no longer. Now go, mortal. Embrace your destiny and go with my blessing.
And considering the previous quote in the PGE3, I think the canon ending is that Vivek was spared by the Nerevarine, as he is not included in the 7 Visions prophecy that is given to the player character in Morrowind. That prophecy states, "His mercy frees the cursed false gods, binds the broken, redeems the mad." The broken, of course, being Sothasil, and the mad being Almalexia. No mention of Big V. Backing away from that side tangent, even if Vivek is dead at the end of your Morrowind playthrough, Azura still gives you the mission of protecting her people and defending Morrowind. So again, it doesn't really make sense that the Nerevarine would just up and leave when they were given a directive by Azura to defend her people. I've seen some folks claim that because Morrowind is one of the easternmost provinces, that they were sailing off to Akavir to defend the shoreline from another invasion. But I don't really like that explanation because the Nerevarine could have just stayed and helped provide a defensive bastion to the coastline rather than sailing on a, quote, expedition to Akavir. But what then do I have in mind? Well, if the Nerevarine is supposed to be a reincarnation of Nerevar, then we need to look into Nerevar's past a bit more, I think, to understand the motives of this character. So in the game of Morrowind, we deal with Nerevar's closest advisors and betrayers, and his good friend Dagothr. But there is someone that we forgot to think about. That's right. I think the Nerevarine is looking for evidence on the whereabouts of the Dwemer, and more specifically, is attempting to make amends with his previous bestie, Dumak Dwarf King. Let me explain to you why I don't think this is the stupidest thing ever. You see, during Nerevar's time, he and Dumak Dwarf King allied with one another, uniting the Chimer and the Dwemer under one banner of Resdayn, and forming what was called the First Council. And for those who don't know, Nerevar and Dumak were really good buddies. We hear from notes left in the 7 Curses that
Nerevar and Dumak were loyal friends until the disagreements between the Dwemer and the other great houses broke out in open conflict.
Then the book Nerevar at Red Mountain elaborates further by saying that they were
two heroes, one from the Kaimer and one from the Dwemer. Induril Nerevar and Dumak Dwarf Orc made peace between their people and together ousted the alien invaders. Then these two heroes worked long and hard to maintain that peace thereafter, though their counselors thought it could not last, or worse, that it shouldn't.
And Almalexia tells us in Tribunal that, for years the Kaimer and the Dwemer had been at war. The Dwemer spurned the Daedra that the Kaimer worshipped, instead placing their faith in their metal creations. It was only when the Nords invaded Resdayn that the two nations were able to join as one, under the leadership of our Nerevar and the Dwarf King Dumak. In time, the two generals became blood friends, and on the day that Nerevar and I were wed, Dumak presented us with twin blades, Hope's Fire and True Flame.
Letters between two historically close, unmarried friends of the same sex.
I do hope that this message finds you well. This day I did go hunting in the grange outside our house while Martha attended to the household chores. Thinking of you dearly, your kind words in the last message meant so much to me. Also your body. Anyway, how's Diane? Yours, Philip.
So yeah, these guys were close. But Dariloth, you may be asking, if they were such good friends, why did they eventually go to war? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Essentially, what Nerevar at Red Mountain tells us is that the war was just a misunderstanding, or at the very least, it began that way. House Dagoth figured out that Kagranak, the chief tonal architect of the Dwemer, was attempting to build the Numidium to ascend the Dwemer into becoming gods. All of Nerevar's advisors and the other great houses urged Nerevar to go to war over this, but he decided instead to ask Dumak personally about it, considering their friendship. Dumak supposedly had no idea what was going on, but was offended that Nerevar was accusing him of something so crazy in his eyes. Nerevar then asked Azura herself if what House Dagoth said was true, and she revealed to her champion that indeed the Numidium was being built. And I've been paraphrasing for a while, but I'll read this next section to you directly. Finally, Nerevar, angered that his friend Dumak would lie to him, went back to Vardenfell. This time, the Kaimer king was arrayed in arms and armor, and had his hosts around him, and he spoke harshly to Dumak Dwarf Orc, king of Red Mountain. You must give up your worship of the Heart of Lorkhan, or I shall forget our friendship and the deeds that were accomplished in its name. And Dumak, who still knew nothing of Kagranak's new god, but proud and protective as ever of his people, said, We shall not relinquish that which has been our way for years beyond reckoning, just as the Kaimer will not relinquish their ties to the lords and ladies of Oblivion. And to come at my door in this way, arrayed in arms and armor and with your hosts around you, tells me that you have already forgotten our friendship. Stand down, my sweet Nerevar, or I swear by the 15 golden tones I shall kill you and all your people. And so from here, war broke out, and then all that fun stuff happens. Nerevar and Dumak fight, Nerevar dies of, air quotes, mysterious wounds, foul murder, and the Dwemer disappear, the Tribunal become gods, and everyone lived happily ever... Oh, wait, no. Sorry, there wasn't a happy ending. Turns out the Tribunal were not great people, and then Nerevar was reborn as the Nerevarine and killed at least 66.6% of them? Dang. Well, anyway, the Nerevarine canonically must have read some of these sources of information talking about how they were betrayed in their previous life, and this would have come as a huge revelation, because at the time, Nerevar wouldn't have had access to this information. And basically, the premise of this video relies on the fact that the Nerevarine understood that the War of the First Council was actually not Dumak's fault, but rather was a complex situation that arose due to rising tensions between both groups and a fundamental misunderstanding between friends. So, where do I think that the Nerevarine went? I think they left to go return the Dwemer to Nirn, or at the very least, try to contact Dumak's spirit, in order to reforge Resdayn and the First Council, because that was when their people were at the height of their power and prowess, which falls in line with their mission of protecting the people of Morrowind. And it just thematically fits the character better, I think. It's unresolved business for Nerevar at the very least, and I feel like that drive may still exist in the Nerevarine. And honestly, due to the crumbling of the Empire and the Mede dynasty, maybe a reforged Resdayn is just what this continent needs to stave off the rising threat of the Thalmor. So why do people think, then, that the Nerevarine went to Akavir? Well, there's a lot of theories, actually, about the origins of the Dwemer people. Most elven groups on Tamriel were descended from the Aldmer people upon their arrival to the mainland. Their stratification comes from their different interactions with their environments and the gods, more than anything else, though. The Altmer are, of course, the closest relatives to the Aldmer, so they don't look that different, but the Bosmer were influenced by Ifra, the Dunmer were influenced by Azura, the Orsimer were influenced by Boethia and Malakath, the Falmer were, I guess, influenced by, like, the snow or something, and then the Aelids got a little bit more tan than the other groups. But the Dwemer have always been interesting because their origin is not directly tied to the Aldmer people, and it's in fact got a lot of contradictory beginnings. The PGE3 twice talks about the Dwemer origins. In the Somerset section, it says, "Even the earliest records of Somerset, however, shed no light on the origins of the Dwemer, who already occupied the northeast of Tamriel when Veloth and his people arrived there." And the section on Morrowind tells us that the earliest civilizations of which there are records is that of the Dwemer. Sometimes called dwarves by the ignorant, the Dwemer were the remnants of the early Aldmer who had settled the coasts, and developed a highly sophisticated and technological culture. And this is weird because it tells us in the first section that there is no light shed on the origins of the Dwemer, but then the next section proceeds to tell us the origins of the Dwemer. So pick your preference, I suppose, but I like to believe that the Dwemer were fairly disconnected from the Aldmer. Either way, it's clear that the Dwemer were the earliest culture to exist in Morrowind, and that mention of there being no evidence that they left from Somerset has always intrigued me, and it's felt intentional, like the developers wanted us to be asking questions about their origins. So, with all that in mind, I propose to you this. We invent a hidden island, or landmass, far off the eastern coast of Tamriel, where the Dwemer originated. And I know the elves are supposed to all be descendants from the Elnafey that stayed on Aldmeris, but maybe this group of Elnafey broke off a little bit earlier, so they're not quite wandering Elnafey, but they're not quite the Tamrielic Elnafey. The dwarves, after all, were agnostics in their faith, which would have quickly made them either leave the Elnafey or be exiled. And perhaps they found this island off of Morrowind and eventually moved in to take more land. For me, I really like this idea because it adds just a bit more mystery to Nirn. No one has ever circumnavigated the planet before, and the lands that we do know of can't surely be all that there is. I would also propose that this Dwemer Island is a really high fantasy location, with the whole of the landmass being mechanized in some way. To be honest, I haven't put a ton of thought into how this would look, but I like 3 ideas so far. The first idea is that this island is hidden underwater, making it look sort of like the Great Blue Hole in Belize. The other idea is that the Dwemer, who we know canonically achieved flight, were also able to make the city float, and now it exists within the clouds. Or maybe it was just another underground settlement, and that's why it was never found. And the original Dwemer made it to Tamriel by tunneling through the ocean to get to Morrowind or something like that. But I'm more than open to suggestions. These are just ideas. I really like the idea of a fully mechanized Dwemer island, though, I can't lie. Oblivion and Skyrim have really made the world much more bland than it used to be in writing, so I wanted to think up something that added that intrigue back into Nirn again. And maybe this was a closely guarded secret that was technologically shielded from even the godly forces of Tamriel until recently. Maybe the island, at the time of the Nerevarine's departure, had just then lost power after so long, and the secrets of the origins of the dwarves were now available for Azura to reveal to Nerevar Reborn. I don't know, I'm just throwing things out there to the community as an alternative option. I understand that there's a lot of straight-up fan-made lore in this video, but I at the very least tried my best, and I always will continue to try my best, to make this as much in line with pre-existing lore as I possibly can. At the end of the day, I feel like the Nerevarine just leaving to go on a side quest to Akavir is really unsatisfying to me. Adding an additional part of their quest that still stays in line with their goal of being Morrowind's protector is much more interesting to me. I really like the mystery of the Dwemer here as well, and I think the connection with Dumak fits the Nerevarine thematically. For so long, we've been fixated on where the dwarves disappeared to that I think we've forgotten to ask ourselves from whence they came. With all that said, tell me your thoughts on where you think the Nerevarine went. Who was your Nerevarine in Morrowind, as well, and how closely do you think that they were to the canonical Nerevarine? And as usual, I want to give a huge shout out to my channel members, all of whom I greatly appreciate for choosing to donate a small portion of their income to help support the work done on this channel. It truly helps me get by every month, and it allows me to be able to upgrade my equipment here for all of you to continue to receive entertainment from this platform. It's always optional, but it's always appreciated. Also, I would like to say, if you made it this far, please like the video. It actually does really help with people being able to see this pop up in their feeds. Please share the video. If you have some friends who like Elder Scrolls, you can throw it in a Discord server or something. Send it to the family group chat. Your dad will love this video, I promise. And lastly, if you'd like to stick around for more, please subscribe. With all that said, I've been Daraloth. Thank you very much, and peace out.